Well, INEC says it is set to review its conduct of the 2023 general elections. And, well, a whole lot of stories have been going on through all of that. And, in a statement signed by its National Commissioner, Festus Okoye, the electoral body says the review, which will involve its national and state level officials, will commence on July 4 and end on August 5. The post-election review will include the Commission's regular and ad hoc staff, administrative secretaries, presiding and collation officers, political parties, election observers, and service providers. The review will focus on all aspects of the electoral activities before, during, and after elections to learn lessons and chart the way forward. While there are calls for the dismissal of the Commission's chairman, civil society organization Partners for Reforms has condemned calls for the sack of the chairman of INEC by the former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Olisa Agbakoba, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. The former NBA president had hinged his call for the sack of the INEC chairman on claims of poor logistics arrangements during the elections. Still, the convener of the CSO Partners for Reform, Ezenwa Wagu, says the 2023 election was highly complex owing to the cashless policy and petrol scarcity weeks to the polls. He argues that while it is true that the election experienced some challenges, the positives far outweighed the adverse outcomes.
We had a very difficult period. It was the first time that we did not postpone election. Anybody who followed the 2023 elections will have been able to look at the context in which that election held. The issue of the unnecessary coloring of the naira, which brought about shortage of cash, both for citizens and for institutions. And for an organization like INEC, that its activities actually depend on vendor relationship, that catastrophic policy of the central bank was a setback for logistics.
Well, before we speak with Ezenwa Wagu, who you just heard for that reason, perhaps let's first get back to the studio and speak with our current affairs analyst, Professor of Communications and Deputy Dean of the Postgraduate School at Bayes University here in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Good to see you, Professor Adeniyi. These are interesting times, and the dust, as they say, is yet to settle. But again, let's dig in deep and look at some of the concerns raised by Eze Nwagu and his team there.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, it's a welcome development, no doubt, because election is critical to the deepening of democracy. And of course, if you don't get it right, if you don't enhance the integrity, the credibility of the process, it will continue to rub off on the democratic process itself. And it is gratifying that INEC is seeking to review the election, to do a post-mortem. And of course, in doing the post-mortem, of course, there will be conclusions, you know. After the conclusions, we hope that the next election will benefit from the lessons learned, you know, from the previous one. And of course, we have some elections, off-season election ahead of us. We also hope that the review, you know, will help in improving on the credibility of this next cycle of election. And do not forget, 4 years is often a short time for the general election. Before you know it, it's always around the corner again. But we've been reviewing in the past, you know, and that's always the problem, really. We often have reasons to doubt if we actually learn lessons. So perhaps we identify lessons, but we are unable to apply them to a next election, which is why there are always reasons to complain. I remember the 2019 election, you know, there was little introduction of technology much unlike the 2023 election. And of course, we had promises in the build-up to this election that, of course, that preparations have been perfected or nearly perfected, and what we saw, was rather shocking, giving room for increased disputation of the process. What we just have to hope for is that, the conclusions we're going to draw, should affect future election. But I think I want to agree with Ezenwa if exactly that's what he said, that we cannot really blame only one person, for the imperfections of the election. Elections arguments have been made in seminar circles. That is a multi-stakeholder affair. It's not just the Electoral Commission that is involved. There are other stakeholders, the security agencies, the media, the civil society organization, the international observers. Everyone is involved. Even security agencies play a very key role in the electioneering process. But you're identifying one man and saying that we know that he plays a critical role, but I don't think that's rather the solution. It might, at the end of the day, be a systemic thing. Systemic in the sense that, we have a problematic socio-political environment, where we do not expect one exercise to be above board, oftentimes, without necessarily justifying the imperfections of the election. Perhaps we should take a holistic look at our system, the downside evidence in different sectors, which is parallelly reflecting in the election process, and maybe try to bring about improvement, because all these things are not just, cannot just be said to be reflected in the election process alone. The election is just an item amongst the many items, the many issues bedeviling us, and when the issues conflict, they affect one item of our life, which is the electioneering process, So can we just look at the whole thing, really, and not just identify one and begin to break bones over it?
Professor Adeniyi, quickly here, as we look into all of that, some of the key questions people want INEC to answer is how quickly is INEC likely to do that? Because you mentioned off-cycle election. Yeah. Keep in mind, there's one happening in November.
About 3 of them, right?
Yes.
3 of them.
So before these elections, whether Kogi,
Bayelsa and Imo State, I think,
Imo, how soon should we expect that review by INEC, so that at least these elections, these off-cycle elections, could be testing?
Could benefit from it. Yes. Yeah. I thought by now, I think it's coming a little late, if I'm not mistaken. Because it should have come like yesterday. Because time flies, and preparations can be very cumbersome. Do not. Maybe if we want to give excuse for INEC, we could say maybe they are slightly distracted, understandably so, by litigations. They need to give attention to court summons, subpoenas, and of course, which is also another very critical process, another critical aspect of the election, entire democratic and election process. Perhaps they are distracted by it, but it's okay that they are also summoning the courage to call all stakeholders to review the last one. I expect that they will be, the stakeholders will be very critical. Some of them might commend them. But again, I think we should also highlight the importance of the civil society organizations that are focused on the election. I've seen some of them asking for the head of the INEC chairman, which is okay, legitimate call, but sometimes we may also have to check the credibility of some of these organizations. I do know that quite a number of them are very, very credible, populated, manned, by reputable individuals. At the same time, there are some of them too, whose character you can call to question. And oftentimes you see them intervening in the election, at the same time they are intervening in other areas, making suspicious agitations, and some of these things can be classed as disreputable. But the gratifying thing is that they are very credible ones, individuals. I don't know, Eze Nwawagu, for instance, I can identify him. I know he's been very consistent. Then Clement Nwako, the one he's leading, Rafsanjani Musa, all these ones, have established their reputations over the years. You can probably not fault their credibility. But the space is also gradually being populated by people who whose characteristics are actually suspect. Understandable, understandable really in a system like this. But again, we have to continue to highlight some of these deficiencies.
Well, we'll come back to you, Professor Adeniyi. Specifically, we'll also talk about the preparation of INEC towards those elections around Bayelsa, which is a riverine area, knowing that that has always been a problem with INEC navigating such places.